Hello, everybody. So I'm inspired to share with you this evening. I'm inspired to explore this idea that God did not create the world. God did not create the world. This stumped me when I first heard it. Understand that I've grown up Catholic, and all I've ever been taught was that God was the creator. And I think many of us, whether you're Catholic or not, if you believe in God, there's a chance that you believe that God created the world. And it seems very logical from the worldly perspective, because from the worldly perspective, we often think of God as this authority figure. We often keep an image in our mind of what God looks like, and sometimes he has a white beard and sits in the sky. Um, in that light, and from that viewpoint, and it's certainly a viewpoint of separateness, because if we have an image in our mind of God, then we see ourselves separate from that image. If we believe that this world is in fact real, then we do believe then that God is separate from us, and through his authority, this world came about. And perhaps, I know for myself, there was a time where I believe God was also in charge of orchestrating the happenings of this world. And to think that he did not create this world is certainly a complete reversal or a complete change from most people's idea of God. But the Course says, the world as you perceive it cannot have been created by the Father, for the world is not as you see it. So two things that I think are important to explore with this quote. The first thing is the world as you perceive it. Perception is not reality. So the world as you see it the world as you perceive it cannot have been created by the Father. So how do we perceive this world? Well, I think most of us would agree that we probably wouldn't be on a spiritual journey if we didn't somehow experience or perceive this world to be a fearful world or a suffering world. That's why we look to spirituality. That's why we look to spirit, is because there's a call within us that recognizes that what we're looking for, which is peace, what we're looking for is truth, can only be found within the spirit. So there's an aspect of us that already knows that this perceived world is not what it seems. And so what we do see is a lot of suffering in this world. And we see it in many forms and in many ways. In the world, as an outside object, we see it in the news, right? We hear about countries that are at war. We hear about people in different countries being sick, starving. We hear about atrocities. We watch the news and hear about murders and rapes and robberies or what have you. And on a personal level, we experience suffering. We sometimes feel we are lacking, or we don't like the bodies that we have or that we're in, and sometimes we judge our bodies for being too fat. We get old and we get gray hairs, and the body eventually dies. That is the world. That is the sad state of the world we see. Yes, there are moments of high and moments of joy, but a lot of crappy stuff along the way. Now, would God create crap? No! Regardless of what your image is of God, I think we'd all agree that God is a symbol of love. God is a symbol of wholeness. God is a symbol of giving. God is a symbol of safety. God is a symbol of omnipotence. And so when you recognize those attributes, and you really contemplate those attributes next to this world, you see this contrast. You see a contrast. So what the Course is saying is that the way we perceive this world, which is in fear, could not have been created by our Father. For the world is not as you see it. Therefore, we are seeing things that are not true in reality. The Course continues with, God created only the eternal, and everything you see is perishable. So basically, the world that we see, this world of suffering, is a perishable world. Things break, things decay. Bodies get older. People die. This perishable world is not the world that God made. We're perceiving it as real, and we're perceiving it as reality. However, it does say that God created the eternal. So it's the eternal within us. That's the Spirit that knows. So it's the eternal that can show us truth. It's the eternal that will bring us to the awareness of what's real. Therefore, there must be another world that you do not see. That's the world we're aiming to go for. That's the world that our spirit calls us to. That is the reality. That is God's true creation. This experience, this worldly experience of suffering, is nothing other than the ego's interpretation based on identification with the world, with this body. Being extensions of God, being whole and creative like God, we certainly have the capacity to believe in the idea of separation and believe in the idea of suffering. Therefore, we can see a world of suffering based upon the filters in our mind that project, or the ego's thought system that projects a world of suffering out there. So we are capable of making this experience feel real to us with the power of God as part of us. Why would we be surprised at our capacity to make something so convincing? We think we did the impossible. We think we've actually separated from truth. We think we separated from God. We think we separated from eternity. But God isn't personal. God is certainly the attributes we've come to know God to be: loving, giving, all-powerful, omnipotent, timeless, eternal. Therein lies truth. Therein lies peace. That's the world to aim to go for. That's the world to see. And so this awakening, if you will, or this aim to see the real world, is simply to undo what is not real, to undo the beliefs that seem to filter out what's true. We filter out the eternal. The eternal's always here. It hasn't gone anywhere. It doesn't step aside while we play house. It's still here. It's still going on. God is omnipotent. He's still here. Our eternal nature is still here. Our creativity is still here. Our capacity to extend and create more of what is true, more of what is love, is still here. We simply have to lay down, heal, forgive the filters that seem to separate us from that world, that seem to separate us from that truth. But perhaps first the understanding and the logic that God did not create this world, perhaps that becomes a stepping stone. Perhaps that becomes helpful in leading us to the direction of what is true. I love you.